Hello everyone and welcome back to LewisFiction and another episode of Spectacular Spider-Man Season 4. This is the Season 4 finale. If you are new around here and you haven't seen the first 12 episodes of Season 4 or any of the 13 episodes of Season 3, then make sure you go back and watch them before you watch this, or else nothing will make sense. But to those of you who have been waiting for this episode, enjoy. Episode 13, Finals. The Sinister Six loom over him. Peter looks up at Captain Stacy, who tells him this is the end. Spider-Man gulps and says, "You died. What is this? Mysterio?" Stacy begins to fight Spidey. In combat, he is well trained and has the upper hand on Spider-Man. The other villains start to join in. Sandman blasts him back. Mr. Negative swipes for his body. Molten Man burns multiple holes in his suit. Scorpion slaps him with his tail, and finally Shocker blasts him with his new upgraded gauntlets. The villains that Spider-Man has already faced before have had an upgrade. Peter knows that all of these guys aren't intelligent enough to gain technical advancements in the way that they have. They are working for someone. Someone with a lot of knowledge in that field. They ragdoll Spider-Man about, beat him down more than he has ever been beaten before. The previous fights with the Six weren't easy, but this was on another level. The upgraded tech along with the unpredictability of the villains that he has never faced before. It becomes too much for him. As he lay there on the ground, Mr. Negative is contacted by Hammerhead over comms. He says good job, and to unmask him. Hammerhead, watching from afar, is finally about to get the reveal he's been waiting for since Spider-Man's first entrance onto the scene. Mr. Negative steps forward and pulls his mask up, and underneath is Peter Parker. Mr. Negative gasps and steps back, dropping the mask to the floor. Sandman exhales that he's just a kid, as Chameleon looks suspiciously over to Mr. Negative, asking if he knows this guy. Molten Man powers down, and Mark Allen steps forward and sympathetically says, "That's Peter Parker." But before they can move in on him, Peter opens his eyes and realizes his mask is gone. He webs it from the floor and in a swift fashion zips away. Chameleon is furious, saying, "Chase after him then." Sandman says there's no point. He's gone. We get a very desperate montage on Peter swinging through the city, hurt and injured. He lands on top of a building and collapses. Something is wrong with his leg, as he goes limp. As the adrenaline wears off, Peter starts to feel the pain. He's cut, bruised, and his leg isn't right. He manages to crawl home as we cut to Aunt May. Aunt May is sat on the sofa with Mary Jane. They're both having a catch-up with each other. Aunt May is expressing how she's really worried about Peter recently. He's always been pretty secretive, but this is on another level. She knows that she works all the time, but she really doesn't see him much anymore. And she doesn't know what's going on with him anymore. She doesn't know if he's in some kind of trouble. MJ reassures May, saying that he's fine. She's seen him plenty of times at school. He is okay. Aunt May holds her head down and says that she hopes so. This is when they both hear a noise that came from upstairs. This startles both of them. MJ says that she'll go and check it out. We cut to Peter, who collapses into his room, groaning in pain. MJ bursts through the door and notices Peter on the floor. Immediately she closes the door behind her as to not to alert Aunt May, and gets down to help Peter as he lay on the floor. She panics, asks him if he's okay frantically. Peter says no. Aunt May shouts upstairs asking if everything is okay. MJ says everything's fine. She makes up an excuse on the spot, saying that the window in Peter's room is jammed and she's going to try and fix it. Aunt May retreats and goes back to watching television. MJ holds Peter up, but he groans in pain as he can't step on his leg. MJ tells Peter he's going to have to go to the hospital as she rips into his suit onto his leg and notices the swelling. Peter says no, he can't let Aunt May see him like this. MJ says that she's going to go get help. Peter shouts no and says to stay with him. He gulps. Tears fill up in his eyes. He tells MJ, gritted through his teeth, that his leg is in so much pain. MJ will be lost for words. She sits down next to Peter and puts her arm on his shoulder. She looks him dead in the eye. The pain, the suffering, but the determination looks right back at her. MJ places her hand on his cheek as a gesture of calmness and reassurance. Peter closes his eyes and then opens them again. This time looking back at her is comfort. The intense spark of MJ and Peter can be felt throughout the scene. MJ is not just Peter's best friend. She is his comfort. She's his reassurance. She's his rock. Peter opens up. In one swift sentence he says they know. MJ asks, who? And Peter will say the villains. They know. They know about him, his secret identity. They know who he is. He's gonna have to go far away. From her, from Gwen, from Aunt May, from everyone else. MJ says that he can't leave. MJ needs him here. Peter looks down and says everyone's going to be in danger because of him, including MJ. MJ puts her hand on his cheek once again and says don't worry about her. Peter says that he's always going to worry. MJ asks what is he going to do. Peter says he doesn't know. We cut to the villains who are back at the HQ. Hammerhead is absolutely livid. He throws things around the room in anger. He says they had him right there. What was the hesitation? Sandman says that he was just a kid. He goes on to say that they've scared him now. Let's just call it quits. Hammerhead slams his fist down on the table and says, do you even know who we're dealing with? Hammerhead says he knows Spider-Man and he knows that he will never quit. That's just who he is. Martin Lee can be seen in the corner, being quiet, trying to process what he just saw, thinking to May Parker, Peter's aunt, thinking about how he would feel if someone had beaten his nephew to near death. He feels dread, sorrow, and regret. Hammerhead says that he heard someone mention his identity. He looks towards Molten Man. Mark holds his head down and says his name is Peter Parker, and that he went to school with his sister. Hammerhead says that's perfect. They'll trap him at school with all his friends and colleagues, and he'll have nowhere to run or hide. Mark pipes up saying, whatever you do, just don't hurt my sister. Hammerhead turns around with a stern look on his face. He says for too long has Spider-Man slipped through his grasp. The big man wants the job done, but he also wants to see Spider-Man perish just as much. They will do what must be done. The next morning, Peter comes downstairs, afraid to see Aunt May. He still can't walk. Something is really, really wrong with his leg. Not even his healing factor is sorting this issue out. Most of his cuts and bruises have subsided apart from his black eye. Luckily for Peter, May had already gone to work. He looks in the basement to find some old crutches that Uncle Ben had when he fractured his leg one time. He takes them to school with him, to support him up. At school, MJ sees Peter and asks what is he doing here, saying that he needs to rest. Peter says that he's got some finals to do. MJ smiles, saying he's always the fighter. Despite the dull tone, Peter and MJ can always make each other smile. Peter says they'll also be looking for him, and MJ was right. If he leaves, they'll just tear the whole city to pieces looking for him. Aunt May's at work, so they can search the house with no trouble. Here, there's nothing stopping them from hurting everyone inside, including MJ. He needs to be here, just in case. On the way to class, Peter will see Gwen. This is the first time they have seen each other since his identity was revealed to her a few episodes ago. Gwen looks at him mesmerized, lost for words. Peter can see that she's in some sort of disbelief. Peter simply says, I'm sorry I never told you before. Gwen will say to him that the only reason they couldn't have been together is because he was Spider-Man. Peter will hold his head down as the bell for class will go. He will say he's sorry, but by then, Gwen had already started heading to class, before the massive rush of students came by them, leaving Peter alone in the crowd. We cut to Peter in class, completing a test. All he could think about is the villains, the Sinister Six, coming for him, potentially hurting everyone around him. It was only a matter of time. And before he knew it, about 30 minutes into his exam, his spider sense goes off. Screaming can be heard from outside the class, and in a scurry, everything goes quiet for Peter. All he could think about was getting out into the hallway, and getting there quick. The class starts to scatter, as he rushes his way to the hallway. As the students run the other way, a fiery hole in the wall stares back at Peter, with a few members of the Six looking down at him. Peter throws his crutches to the floor, and limps into position. Let's do this, he'll say. Peter will web either side of the hallway and will fling himself at Scorpion, who stood in front of him, kicking him out of the building. Peter lands, his leg still hurting. Shocker blasts him back into the building. However, as the Six start to collectively come together, Peter realizes that he needs to regroup himself. He can't lose this fight. Peter hides in the janitor's closet. The Six spread out trying to find him. Meanwhile, the rest of the students have evacuated now, leaving the hallways empty. However, a blonde-haired girl still peeks her head around the corner. It's Gwen. And she can see Shocker heading her way. She hides around the corner. Meanwhile, with Peter, he thinks to himself that he has to pick them off one by one. It's the only way he's going to win this fight. Peter sees Shocker walking outside the janitor's closet. He will think to himself that this is his chance. He can take Shocker out, right here and now. He leaps out of the closet, tackling him to the ground. Shocker elbows him off him. Peter webs his gauntlets and pulls one of them off. However, it explodes in Peter's face. Shocker laughs and tells Peter that if it's removed from him, it has a self-destruct device planted inside. Peter coughs and finds it hard to get back up. Gwen watches from afar as Shocker approaches Peter. Just as Shocker loaded up a shot directly aimed at Peter's face, he falls to the ground as he's knocked out from a metal pipe hitting him from around the back of the head, and Gwen stood in front of Peter, holding her hand out to help him up. Peter takes it as he stands up, still limping with his leg. Peter says thank you. Gwen says it wasn't fair to leave her out of his life like that. Peter says he was just trying to protect her. Gwen says that that wasn't his choice to make. Peter holds his head down, thinking to himself, that's what MJ told him about a week ago. Gwen will tell Peter you're welcome, but go save the world. Peter, with a look of determination, gains the energy to leap out of the hole in the wall. He will reach for his mask in his pocket and pull it over his face, and rip his t-shirt and trousers off to reveal a worn, torn and almost destroyed Spider-Man suit. He will encounter Sandman, who is patrolling the front of the building. They engage in combat as the other villains start to join in. It's ride or die now for Peter. He has to win. There is no other option. But once again, as the villains all pound down on him, Peter is injured, hurt, outnumbered, and outclassed in every way. A crowd starts to form outside Midtown's front garden as the police arrive on the scene as well, watching from afar. Jean DeWolf will exit her car as she sees Spider-Man on the ground, almost close to death. As the five of them stand over him once more, Chameleon will say, let's finish the job this time. The students and the civilians that are watching on are stunned at what they are witnessing. Chameleon picks up Spider-Man and holds him in front of them all. Martin Lee, who hasn't really gotten all that involved in the fight, stands quietly in the back, once again thinking about who he's really hurting. Thinking back to his family that he lost. He couldn't let May lose her nephew, the same way that he lost his daughter to Norman Osborn. We also look at Flint Marko, who also stands there with a face of regret. He's only doing this for his family, who are held captive by Hammerhead. He didn't want any of this. He didn't want this life any longer. We also take a look at Mark, who looks out into the crowd, and standing right there is Liz, his sister. Crying, distraught, and overwhelmed, Mark realized what he was doing. He may be doing all of this for a cure and another chance at normal life, but at what cost to those he loves? Chameleon holds Spider-Man in front of Scorpion and asks if he would like to do the honors. Scorpion says absolutely. But before he could deliver the final blow, Mark shouts stop. Chameleon looks at Mark perplexed. Hammerhead comes over the comms and asks Chameleon what's the holdup. Mark says that this needs to stop. Martin Lee and Flint Marko also step forward, agreeing with Mark. Chameleon is confused and angrily asks what are they doing. Lee says it's time for this to end. Flint says he didn't want any of this life. He can't hurt anyone else. Chameleon, with a face of anger, drops Spider-Man as him and Scorpion engage in battle with Lee, Marko and Mark Allen, but they're overpowered and the Sinister Six implodes in front of Spider-Man. Peter finds the strength to get up and watch as Mark, Lee and Flint allow themselves to be arrested on sight, redeeming themselves, not just as villains, but as people. All three of them coming to terms with what they did and how it was wrong. Lee learning that he couldn't let another mother lose his son. Mark learning that there may never be a cure, but maybe he can save everyone else. And Flint Marko knowing that he doesn't want this life anymore, hoping that there's another way to save his family. Lee, the most emotional out of the bunch, realizes in one swift moment that the life he has been thrown away. Flint is happy that he doesn't have to cause any more suffering, and Mark realizes that the cure was never physical, but to not cause any harm to those that he loves. Scorpion and the Chameleon are also apprehended by large amounts of police, leaving Spider-Man. The crowd still persists and watches on as Jean DeWolf approaches him. Spider-Man thanks Jean for arriving when she did. Jean DeWolf holds up her badge and says Spider-Man is under arrest. Spider-Man sighs in disbelief, not having any energy to fight it. But before she could cuff him, a voice shouts from across the crowd. It's Gwen Stacy. Jean DeWolf turns around. Gwen says you can't arrest him. All Spider-Man does is put himself on the line for everyone else and this city. He's selfless, and he thinks of anyone but himself. Gwen says this in realization of the fact that all this time, Peter would put himself on the line for anyone as a selfless act to protect. As much as she wishes she knew about Peter sooner, Peter Parker is a good person. She will shout to Jean DeWolf that her father knew Spider-Man was a good person, and that if he had one dying wish, it would be that Spider-Man carried on doing what he does best for the city, which is protecting its people. DeWolf thinks to herself. She thinks about the relationship that Stacy had with Spider-Man. and she retracts her cuffs and tells Spider-Man to get out of here before she changes her mind. Spider-Man, with the strength he had left, leaps into the air and swings away. We cut to a scene with Hammerhead, who has failed. The villains are in prison, and Hammerhead has nothing left. A voice can be heard in the background, a familiar one at that. Hammerhead says he's sorry he failed. The man says he didn't just fail, he has made his life so much harder. He says he'll just have to take Spider-Man out by himself, as none other than Norman Osborn reveals himself to be alive and back in the picture after all of this time. He tells Hammerhead to leave his sight, and he does so, retreating back into the shadows. All of this, Hammerhead, the Sinister Six, the break-ins, was all down to Norman Osborn. We cut to later on that night. Peter Parker lay there on the sofa with an ice pack over his face. A rumble can be heard at the door as Aunt May enters the house and sees him. She hugs him with a slight tear in her eye. She says that she heard what happened today, and if he's okay. Peter says yeah, he just got caught up in the crossfire is all, using that as to explain the cuts and bruises all over his body. They have a conversation with each other about the lack of communication recently. May will say that she knows that she's been working a lot, but she's worried sick. She never sees him anymore. Peter apologizes and says he's been busy, but hopefully he'll have more time to see her now. May says that's good, because she's actually planning to go out for Mary Jane's birthday with Anna and MJ next week. Peter's eyes widen. He didn't even realize it was her birthday soon. However, there's a ring at the door. May says that could be her. Peter says that he'll get it. Peter walks to the door and opens it, and to his surprise, it wasn't Mary Jane. It was Gwen. Gwen will say that she wanted to see him, and she needed to talk. Peter says, sure. He steps outside and shuts the door behind him so Aunt May can't hear. She will say that she wishes things could have been different. She will say that she loves him. Peter will say I love you too, as he holds his hand out to her, but Gwen pulls away. She will say to Peter that she wished she knew sooner about him and about Spider-Man. Peter's face trembles slightly, trying to hold back emotion. Gwen will go on to say that after Harry left and after her father died, all she really had left was Peter. But he ignored her, and she now knows why. Peter tries to explain that he was only doing it to protect her, and she says that she understands. If she was in the same position, she probably would too. But it was never his choice to make. It was never his choice to choose whether Gwen should have been in his life or not. Gwen will say that she has nothing left here, so she came to say goodbye. Peter asks, what does that mean? Gwen will say that she's moving across state. She's got an offer for an entry into a college in San Francisco that wants to take her as an early applicant due to her expressive knowledge in biology, and she's going to take it. Peter's face drops. He congratulates her, but it's more of a bittersweet congratulation than anything else. Peter gulps and asks when she's going. Gwen will say that she flies tomorrow. Peter looks down. He looks back up at her and locks eyes. He says that he'll miss her, and Gwen says that she will too. They hug one another, and Gwen holds him tight, but Peter holds her tighter. And with one final goodbye, Gwen Stacy leaves Peter Parker on his doorstep. Lovers that could have been. Peter sits down on his step and watches as the sun sets over Queens. We will cut to one final montage of Peter repairing the suit, him visiting MJ, giving her a birthday present, and life going generally in the right direction. A chapter has been closed, but a brand new one has been opened, as we end on a shot of the dinner between Aunt May, Anna Watson, Peter Parker, and Mary Jane Watson. And we conclude this story of Spectacular Spider-Man. Thank you very much for watching Spectacular Spider-Man Season 4. Hopefully you all enjoyed this season. If you did, make sure to leave a like on it, and also make sure to subscribe so you do not miss Venom Lethal Protector. Yes, that's right. Venom Lethal Protector is the next thing in this kind of, I guess you could say, universe of Spider-Man stories. That is the spin-off that we are going to be doing of Venom. We're also going to be making a summer break movie that will take place in between seasons 4 and 5, so make sure you don't miss that as well. And obviously going into season 5, you are going to need to have watched the summer break movie, because obviously that will tie into the story of season 5. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed, and yeah, leave a like, leave a comment what you thought of the entire season. I want to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks for the continued support, and I'll see you guys in a bit. Take care, and peace.